Today I'm going to show you how to create this cool procedural cobblestone texture. This texture is completely procedural, infinitely scalable, and pretty customizable too. This is what our nodes are going to look like. To set up our scene, I'm going to get rid of that cube and bring in a plane. Change the whole middle area to your shader editor and put that material that was on our cube onto our plane, and then hit N to get rid of that shelf on the right. I'm going to change the top right to my 3D viewport and make it a little larger and zoom in. Then hold down Z and move your mouse up to go into rendered mode. We're going to put in an HDRI, so go to World Properties and select Color and Environment Texture, and then go to Open and just find some HDRIs you've got. If you don't have any, you get some free ones at hdrihaven.com, and I'm going to use Cloud Layers. Just going to look around and see where my light source is coming from. There's the sun up there, so I'll just keep that in mind. You can tell by this widget right here which direction you're facing there. So this is the normal direction, so just back and to the left is where the light's coming from. I'm going to change this to cycles and experimental, and if you have a GPU, just click GPU as well. And let's put on a subdivision surface modifier set to adaptive subdivision and simple. And that's going to make it so that stuff that's closer to the camera subdivides more, and stuff that's further away subdivides less. So it saves on memory and subdivides a lot more than it normally would with regular, subdivision surface modifier. I'm going to go back up to World Properties, and under Ray Visibility, I can unclick Camera, and then the HDRI will still be lighting the scene, but it's just not visible in the background. Then I'm going to grab this light wherever it is. There we go, and just delete that. Then let's click back on the plane there and go down to Material Properties, and I'm just going to enable displacement by going to the settings and either going to displacement only or displacement and bump. So I'm just going to click on displacement and bump. To start with the textures, I'm going to bring in a Voronoi node and just place it here. We'll come at a distance and hit Control T and just make sure object is plugged into the mapping node there. I'm going to set this Voronoi at 2D, and I'm just going to bring the randomness down to 0. Then I'm going to hit Control Shift D so that duplicates it while leaving it attached to this mapping node. And I'm going to set the second one to F2. I'm going to search and bring in a math node and just place it right here. And if we open this up and hit S, it changes it to subtract. I'm going to subtract the F1 from the F2, and it gives us this grid here. It's actually pretty similar to F2 Chebyshev. When you think about it, like that's just this one right here. In fact, let's do a comparison. I'm going to bring in a displacement node and just place it right here and go into height, and let's plug this into displacement. Let's turn this down to 0.1 maybe. 0.2. Yeah, so there we go. Basically what we're doing is we're taking this displacement from the F2 Euclidean, and we're subtracting this one, the F1 Euclidean. And yeah, it gives us this result right here, which is, like I was saying, kind of like this one right here. It's kind of similar. You could probably use this F2 Chebyshev, but I'm going to use this one here. It's really your choice. So right now this slope is kind of linear. I want to change that. I want to remap it. So I'm going to bring in an RGB curves node and just kind of make a shape like this here. And then let's bring this down to maybe 0.05 or something like that. Let's look at this principled BSDF. It's starting to look a little bit better there. Get rid of this Voronoi node. Basically, I wanted to randomly adjust how far each row is pushed over. So just this location value, the x-axis there. And I also wanted to vary how much these cobblestones were stretched. So this x scale right here. So what I'm going to do is move this over, make a second mapping node, and I'm going to plug something into the location here and something into the scale down here. I'm going to move this texture coordinate over a little bit and bring in a separate XYZ node. Just place it right here and run object into the vector. And we're going to come out of the Y, and that's going to go into a math node first, and then into a map range node. I'm going to change this mapping node to absolute, and this map range node, let's change this to stepped linear. And then for all these values here, just put these in for now, and I'll explain how I got them afterwards. For the from min, go negative 2.1. For the from max, 4. And then 0 and 1 to the 2 min and 2 max. And for the amount of steps, it's going to be 29.5. And then let's put a white noise node right after that. So this converts it into just a random color for each row. So I'm going to move this back a little bit here. And this is going to go into a math node, which I will just set to multiply, and I'll just set to 1 for now. And then into a combine x, y, z. Because we don't want to affect all 3 of these coordinates. We just want to affect the x values of these coordinates. So let's plug this into the location here. And then let's look just at this output right here. We can see now some of these have been shifted over, basically random amounts. And let's go ahead and plug the color output of this Voronoi into the base color on our principal BSDF, just to give us some color to look at. It might not be that great yet, but it gives us some variation. Easier to see the offsets this way. If you adjust this multiply node as well, kind of push them over at random amounts so they can be lined up or offset. I'm going to set this multiply to 2 and move this white noise texture up. Then I'm going to grab all 3 of these, hit Control Shift D so they remain attached to this map range. Let's plug this into the scale on that second mapping node. I'm going to bring in another math node and put it here and change that to add. Basically, this multiply here makes the bricks, less or more similar to each other in terms of length. And this add just changes all of them more or less at the same time to being, narrower or wider. So I'm going to set this first one at negative 1.2 or something, maybe negative 0.6. Let's do that. And then this second one, let's change this to 1.2. Doesn't really matter. Play around with these values. Just kind of see what they do. I'm going to grab these 3 nodes and hit Control J, then hit F2. We'll just call this random offset. And then I'll do the same thing for these 4 nodes down here. Control J, and this will be a random length. If we want to give those a color, hit N to bring up this shelf here and just click this box. Then you can choose whatever color you want. So if you tab into edit mode and size this up, you can see that eventually this tiling stuff doesn't really work anymore. So I want to try and figure out a way to tile it. But if you do it, like I'm going to do it with a vector math node just set to scale, and then the second one set to fraction. And it does that. That does work for certain things, but in this case, it would work on the y-axis, but not on the x-axis because they're offset random amounts. So I'm going to take both of these out here and just approach it a different way. So I'm going to bring in a separate XYZ node, place it here, and a combine XYZ node, and place it here. We'll plug in the Z as well, and let's look at the Y output. And I'm just going to add a math node on here. We're going to add a couple math nodes on there. The first node is going to be an add node, and then let's change the second one to a multiply node. The third one is going to be a fraction node, wherever I can find it. There it is. And the fourth node is going to be an add node, and then the last node is going to be a multiply node. Maybe there was a way to do this a little easier, but I fiddled around with the numbers quite a lot and finally got this to work. So I'm just going to give you those numbers. The add is negative 0.3. The multiply is negative 0.12. The fraction doesn't have a setting. The second add is negative 0.22, and the multiply is just going to be set to 0.5. I'm going to plug this back into the y there, and let's just lengthen this and just put it there. And this is going to be my tiling setup. So I'm just going to hit Control J, and yeah, tiling setup there. Let's change the color to something. There we go. Just going to hit N to get rid of that shelf, and I just have to make a correction here. This should actually be 5, and over here, where I've got this combine XYZ in the random length frame, these should both be 1. So there we go. Now we've got the setup I want. So now that we have this tiling setup, it does repeat. And if you want to, tab into edit mode and scale up, you'll notice that it keeps on going forever. It does repeat. You see like this red here is the same as this red down here, I believe. It's the same as this red up here. So you can see about how much distance it covers before it repeats. So not a lot of repetition. It's kind of nice. You could expand it even more, but it takes a lot of work, and it just has to do with this map range node and fiddling around with these numbers here. So yeah, this works for me. So I'm going to size this back down. You see my dimensions are kind of large here. I'm just going to go back to 2 and then hit Control A and apply that scale. I think of this as the length. We can control the width with this number right here. So let's put a frame over it. Control J and hit F2, and this will be the width of stones. Let's just go stone width, I guess. There we go. It doesn't really matter if this is positive or negative. You can see though, as you raise it up, these get a lot narrower. So I'm going to just set it at 0.2 for now. I'm going to add some noise to distort everything right after this texture coordinate node. So just bring a noise in there and just set the the scale to 1, the detail to 6, and the roughness to 0.6. And then bring in a mix RGB and place it right after the noise. And then let's connect object to color 2. And then let's change the factor to 0.9. I'm going to make an incision here and add a little bit more detail with one more noise texture and mix RGB setup here. Connect object to color 2, and then let's change this to 10, and we'll leave everything else the same, and then let's change this to 0.96 right here. So, not necessary to do, but it does give you a little bit more detail for those stones there. Then I'm going to grab this noise texture and hit Control-Shift-D, so it remains attached to that object output of the texture coordinate node. I'm just going to move it down here, maybe do one more incision here. And the way that you do that is hold down Shift and just right-click and drag through the node setup. So I'm going to actually have 2 of these. So let's just bring this a little closer. And these are going to just add on to our displacement. This top noise texture, let's set the scale to 45 and the detail to 4, and we'll just set the roughness back at 0.5. I'll do that to this one as well. And for this bottom one, let's set the scale to 20 and the detail to 4. I'm going to run this top noise into a color ramp, and then let's set the black at 0.28, and the white is going to come down to 0.31. I'm going to do the same thing to this bottom one here. Let's just plug the factor in there. And this black is going to be at 0.15, and the white is going to be at 0.33. So let's just look at both of these here. The top one is just some spots. Basically, it's little divots that we're going to be taking out of the stones. And this bottom one here is just other imperfections, just a little larger and softer. So let's add these to the displacement with an add. It's a math note set to add, I guess. So let's plug this top one in first, and then this bottom one. It's going to go right afterwards, just into that add there. Then let's view our principled BSDF. So it's looking pretty good. Those are a little extreme, so I'm going to duplicate this add and change it to multiply. And we're going to change this bottom one to 0.05. Or pardon me, the top one to 0.05, and this bottom one is going to be 0.02. So very subtle. You can still see, the little chips out of there, but they're a lot smaller. It's going to make a frame around these guys here. Grab all of those, hit Control J, and these are going to be the imperfections / divots. Change the color here. The last thing I need to do for displacement is I just want to make an area for the grout to be around these cobblestones. And I'm going to use a color ramp here and just place it right after this subtract and before this RGB curves node. The black we're going to bring up to 0.05 and the white we're going to bring down to 0.5. Let's duplicate this principled BSDF here, and I'll just put it up here. Let's mix them together with Control Shift, right-clicking and dragging from one node to the other. It creates this mix shader here. And I'm going to duplicate this color ramp and just place it right here. We're going to feed this into the mix shader there. This top one, I'm just going to change the color to something darker for this grout here. And then let's adjust this color ramp. I'm going to set this black at 0.09, and the white is going to come down to 0.12. As I'm zooming in, it doesn't really look right there, so I'm just going to adjust this a little bit, make it a little bit better. Drag this black down to maybe 0.035, something like that. And this white, why don't we bring it down to 0.1 maybe? And drag it down a bit more. This is fine here. I mean, it kind of looks like there's some grout on some of these stones. So maybe 0.08 looks pretty good. Let's start working on the color here. I'm going to bring in another color ramp and place it right here. And the way I had this set up originally, it was basically just 3 or 4 colors, browns, grays, blacks, whites, that kind of thing. So play around with it and tweak it as much as you want. I'm not going to spend that much time. This looks pretty good. I'm just going to move forward from here. I'm going to grab another noise, just duplicate this one, I guess, with Control-Shift-D, and let's adjust this. The scale is going to be 40, the detail 6, and the roughness 0.7. And let's go ahead and just run this straight into a bump node. So we'll plug it into the height there, and you can see it's a little strong. I'm just going to move these closer over here and just make some reroutes. This bump node, let's change it to 0.4, and this is going to go right into our grout texture, which is actually this one right here, just into the normal there. There we go. So let's see what we're working with. Now it's got a bit more bump there. I'm going to move this a little closer here, and let's make a reroute here and duplicate this guy. I'm going to change the bottom one to just 5 and 2 and 0.5, so it's just the default. Let's come out of the factor and go into a color ramp, and I'm going to put one here and actually have another factor output here. I'm going to put another color ramp right here as well. So color ramp on both of these. The top one, the white is going to come down to 0.37, and the black is actually going to be raised a little bit above it at 0.6. And then this one here, we'll change the black to 0.72, and the white again is going to go below that. It's going to go at 0.27. So there's the top one there, and there is the bottom one there. I'm going to look at this top output again and bring in a mix RGB, and if I place it here, it'll be plugged into the right one, just color one. And this one, I actually want to go into the factor. So we can see it's kind of this splotchy material, kind of cloudy there. And this one here should be set to BC, BC, BC for the hex code. Then I'm going to feed this into a color ramp and a bump node. So I'll just grab this bump node here. We'll just reuse it. I'm going to plug that into the height there. And this is going to go into the normal for our regular cobblestones there. You see what it looks like. Might be a little strong, but we'll wait until we add some roughness, which is going to be from this node here. So let's set the bottom one. It's going to be a hex code of CCCCCC. So you can see it's mostly white, and that is going to be at 0.13. And then white is going to come down to 0.67. So if we see this, it's a very light image. So these stones are going to be quite rough, not smooth. And let's plug that into the roughness there and see what that looks like. On the grout, I'm just going to change the roughness to 1, so that's not sticking out so much. Then I'm going to move this up a little bit because I'd like to create an accent stone as well. So I'm going to duplicate this principled BSDF here, and I didn't really need to leave it attached, I guess. Maybe not the best move. Actually, I'm going to bring this up. We're going to do a new roughness map and not have a normal map. So yeah, it was probably best not to do it that way. But then I'm going to mix these two together by holding down Control-Shift and right-clicking and dragging through both of them. And let's just make a little bit more room here as well. On this roughness here, we're going to change the color of this bottom one here. Instead of CCCCCC, it's going to be 404040. So a little darker on this one. It's going to be a bit shinier. Then I'm going to create a color ramp, place it right here, and run this color from that F1 Euclidean Voronoi we set up a while back. And this is going to be changed to constant, and I'm going to bring the top slider, the white one, down to 0.8. And if we look at that, we basically see most of these are black and a couple are white. So I'm going to plug this into the mix shader, and we want to swap these. So it should be like this, where it's mostly regular stones and then just a few accent stones. And then the last thing I did, just for fun, is I changed the transmission to 1. So now we get kind of a reflection of whatever HDRI you have in your scene. And if you blow it up, you can actually look from below and you can see all these areas where the light comes through, which is kind of cool. So I'm just going to label this here. This is going to be cobblestones. This is going to be accent stone. And this is our grout up here. Next, I just want to go through and change all these color ramps to map ranges that we can. So let's check out this first one here and bring in a map range. Just place it right here, and we'll run this factor into the value. So this one's pretty easy. The black is at 0.6 and the white is at 0.37. So we need to change this top one to 0.6, and this is going to be 0.37. Let's just check it. Looks good. Let's go ahead and replace it. Put it in there, and we'll get rid of that one. For this color ramp going into the accent stones roughness, it is a little different. So let's take a look at that one. I'm going to bring in a map range node, place it right here, and plug it into the value. For this one, let's check the value of this bottom slider here, and it's set at 0.051. So let's change our black to 0.051. Then that position is going to be at 0.13, and this white slider is at 0.67. So let's just check that we did it right. Here's the top one. Here's the bottom one. For this color ramp set to constant, I'll do it slightly different. Just duplicate this guy here. And because it's set at 0.8, we'll just go 0.799 and 0.8 here. Let's just see what it looks like. Yeah, I'm satisfied with that. It is close enough. So let's get rid of that color ramp. Let's also put a math node right here. Let's set it to add, and let's set it to 0. But this is going to be the control over the accent stone amount. If you want to adjust the roughness or the bump, make sure as well that you're kind of looking with some reflection going on there as well, because it does look a lot different than if you're looking at it from this angle here. You really can't tell until you see it interacting with light how it's going to look. Okay, that's it for today. Hope you could see what I was doing and how you might put your own unique twist on it if you wanted to change it around. If you do have any questions, just let me know in the comments. I'll do what I can to respond. Special thanks to my supporters on Patreon and Gumroad as well, and thanks for watching.